Hi, this is PR Frank, and today I'm going to talk about image optimization for the web. It can also help you understand how to manipulate images and correct them so that you can use them for multiple outputs. This image that I have open here, I took with my iOS device in a field recently, and you'll notice the file name is an HEIC. It's a high efficiency file type that has a lot of pixels to it, and it has a very high resolution. It's not good to put directly on the web. And let me show you why. If I go to image size in Photoshop, it's going to give me a lot of information about the image. So first of all, it's 4,000 pixels wide, 3,000 pixels tall. If you imagine a 1920 by 1080 is your standard HD size for a monitor or a television, this exceeds that greatly. It even exceeds 4K. I don't want to change this image at all by resizing it. So I'm going to keep it there for now because I'm going to resize it differently. But I just wanted to show you how large this image is just coming out of my phone. No image is ever just perfect coming out of a device. So it's always going to be a good idea to enhance the image in some way. And in Photoshop, probably one of the easiest ways to enhance your image and get the look you want is by adding an adjustment layer here. And there are all sorts of adjustments that you can make. And one of the ones that I always turn to is just called levels. And it's a histogram that displays pixels from the darkest pixels to the lightest pixels and everything in between. And I typically like to take the black point and slide it inward a little bit. And you see what happens to the blacks, what's called crunching the blacks. I really enhance those blacks so the blacks are as black as they can be. And I can do the same thing on the whites. I can drag that inward to enhance some of those lighter colors. Okay, and so I've just enhanced my image a little bit. And you can turn on and off the visibility of the levels layer to see that. It just pops a little bit. And this middle slider, the gray slider, can be used to decide how much of the shadows you want to bring out. So I can bring out a lot of shadows in there, or I can deepen them. Okay, and I just slide that until I get the look that I want. Now here's the before and after of the image. Okay, so it brightens it up, it blackens the blacks, and it just makes that image pop a little bit. There's so much more you can do, but just adding a simple little levels adjustment and messing with the sliders can really bring out some detail and enhance your image. If I come to the crop tool here, there's a drop down, and there's a lot of common presets for things you might use for the web. So let's say we just wanted to have this as a nice square image on our page. The crops it in, and it lets us drag that picture around so I can mess with the composition. I want to bring it in a little bit here. I want to really accentuate that photo and lose the fence here that's in the corner. There we go. So now I have a nice image for the web page, but it's still very large. And so there's a few options I can use here. If I go into File, I can choose from the Export menu, Export As or Save for Web. What I like about using Save for Web is it gives me lots of options and it automatically saves at 72 pixels per inch, which is great. So you can see this is very large file, and this is what it would look like right now. And over here, you've got the presets you can use. I've got PNG 24, which is the highest PNG format in these presets. Also PNG 128 dithered. Okay, you don't see much of a difference there, but as you start to look into the sky here, it's really kind of broken it down so that there's not much of a gradient transition in the colors. Let's look at the difference between the PNG 8 dithered and the other version. It's going to be a 1.5557 megabyte file, and it'll take 289 seconds to download at 56.6 kilobits. Now, nobody really has that kind of connection anymore, so I'm going to switch this to something standard like, let's just say 1 megabyte per second on cable. So it would take 17 seconds to download that. So that's a lot. If I change this to PNG 24, you can see that that gradient transition is much smoother, but it's going to take 49 seconds to download, and it's going to be almost 5 megabyte file. So as you go through your different settings here, you can see the effect that these different file formats will have on your image. Here's GIF dithered. Here's a lower res GIF dither. So as you can see, sometimes you're going to end up messing with your image quality, but there's a style that people like these days, which is kind of a grungy, gritty style, and you might enjoy just limiting yourself to a few colors. That's going to enhance the look of your page. But for our purposes, I'm just going to choose PNG 24. And here I can adjust my image size. I know that this is for a web page, and I'm just going to have a smaller image, maybe 600 pixels by 600 pixels. And you'll notice the width and the height are linked, so they change together. And when I click on save, it allows me to save that as a PNG wherever I like. I'm going to go ahead and put it right back in that images folder, and I'll call it Black Eyed Susan. Okay. If I go now to open that image, I just go to File, Open, and there's my Black Eyed Susan export as a PNG. And I go to Image, Image Size. You can see now that it's only 600 pixels by 600 pixels at 72 pixels per inch. So that's much more usable for the web than my original photo. And I was able to crop it and export it for use on a web page. Now here's another common file type that you're going to run into. If you're using a digital SLR and you have that thing set to RAW, then you might get something like this. Now I have a Nikon, and so the RAW file is an NEF. Other cameras have different file extensions, but I'm going to open this headshot. And what it does is when you open a raw image in Photoshop, Photoshop RAW kind of takes over, and it makes you decide on some adjustments you make before you actually open that image to edit in Photoshop. So I can make a lot of my changes right in here. All I was really messing with were the blacks and the whites, right? So I can take the black slider and drag it to the left a little bit, and a lot of those blacks will be deeper. You can see the blacks along her hair and her eyes and along her neck have gotten a little deeper. And I can take the white slider and slide it the opposite direction to brighten some of those colors in there. And then I can mess with the shadows slider to decide how much detail I'd like to see in her hair or the background. And there's so much you can do here. You can even mess with the white balance if you wanted to. Up at the top, there's a white balance eyedropper. I can click that and find something that's like a gray. And see, the blue turned a lot nicer blue with that particular selection. So now that I've made the adjustments I want, I can look at a before and after. Down here at the bottom, there's a swap. There's the before. You see it's sort of flat. And now it's a little deeper, richer color, and I get the detail that I want out of it. So now that I've made my adjustments here in Camera Raw, I can choose Open Image, and it'll open in Photoshop. Now, let's look at the pixel dimensions of this image. If I go to Image, Image Size, you can see that this is a very large image too. It's very similar to the one I got out of my phone. And I want to use this on the web in a couple of different ways. One of the ways I want to use this is I want it to be a thumbnail, and when I click it, it's going to generate the larger image. I don't always have to load the larger image. So I can go to File, Export again, but this time Export As. And Export As gives me the opportunity to export this image in various sizes. Okay, so if I drop down the sizes, you can see I can export it as 1/10 of the size, which is probably good for a thumbnail. Okay, I can add another one with this plus button, and I maybe just want to export it at also half the size. So it's a little larger, but it's not 100%. So now that I have those two, I can also choose the format from there. I got lots of choices here, but I think JPEG is fine. There's no transparency in this image, so it'll work. And I'm going to choose Export. When I do, it asks me where I want to put them. I'll go ahead and put them in that same images folder and open that. Now let's go look. In that images folder, I have 2 JPEGs now of that picture. There's this one and that one. So this will be the thumbnail. And when I go ahead to click it or hover it, and I can see a bigger image of it, this is half of that resolution. Okay. And if you want to look at the information on that file, the dimensions of this one are 331 by 490, and this is 632 by 2464. So that is a really helpful tool to be able to use the image multiple ways on a page. Now, the other thing we could do with this is have an image rollover. So I want to create two different versions of this image so that when I roll over it, something changes. And I'm going to just add an adjustment layer here for black and white. And you can click through the different versions of this to see which one you might like better. You can also stay on default and use the sliders, swing those guys back and forth, decide what you want to accentuate. And it'll take the colors from the original image and use those to enhance the photo. Give her a little highlight on her face. Do the same thing, bring out the details of the hair. So that's a really great way to really make a nice black and white photo that's attractive. Here's the before and after. Before, after. The color almost hurts your eyes a little bit when you choose that. Now we're going to use the crop tool again now that we have a black and white image. And we're going to choose a standard dimension for a photo, which is 4 by 5. So I move that around until I want to make sure to bring in her hair. Her eye is going to be a little south of that line that we normally have just because she's got that hair up there. But let's go ahead and use that for our crop preset. Now this hasn't actually changed any of the pixels. What I really want to do is I want to reduce the pixel dimensions of this as well. So if I come in here, I can choose something in pixels that's going to represent a 4 by 5 image, but reasonable for the web. So I can drop this down and choose WH and resolution. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to put a width in pixels and a height in pixels. Let's make it easy and do 400 px. Please don't type IN in there. If you type in IN, Photoshop will take a really long time to process that and you won't get the result you want. And make sure to put 72 in here for the web. Okay, now if I accept my change, the picture gets super small, but that's because it's all the way down at 33. If I do a Command 1 or Control 1, it brings it to 100%. So this is a 400 by 500 pixel image. That's what that's going to look like. And that's black and white. We're going to go to File, Export, and this time Quick Export as PNG. And we're going to do this as Headshot BW. And we're going to take off the black and white layer. We still have our color one under there because it's non-destructive. We go to Export, Quick Export as PNG, and we do Headshot Color. So now, if we go in, we see we have a black and white and a color version at 400 by 500 pixels that we can use as a rollover in a web page later on. Now, it may also be important to you to create an image with transparency. This technique of removing the background of an image has only gotten easier over the years. If we go into the Quick Selection tool and hold, you'll see there is now an Object Selection tool. All you got to do is draw a selection around the object, and it does a pretty good job of estimating what should be selected out of that. I can click the Mask button, and now I've got a really nice mask on my image, separating her from the background. Does a pretty good job. So let's do this also as a Quick Export as PNG, because PNG holds transparency, and let's call it Headshot Transparent. So now you've got a lot of tools at your disposal, and you've got a lot of pictures ready for the web. Next, we're going to go into Brackets and Dreamweaver to show you how you can use these images in a web page. Okay, now let's turn to Dreamweaver and see how we can use some of the images that we created in Photoshop for the web in Dreamweaver. I'm just going to create a brand new site here. Create new, HTML. And right here, I can begin to craft my page. I first have to define my site. It's a really good idea to go to Manage Sites when you're starting out. I'm going to make a brand new one, new site, and I'm going to call it Images. And I'm going to navigate to the location. Here's the location where that's going to be. I also have to define my images folder under Local Info, Images folder. It's a great idea to tell your site where the images folder is. That way, when you bring images in, it automatically pops them in there and you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I can begin to create my page. Right here in the body, I can create some text, and let's just say image optimization. And I can select that, and I can come over here into insert, and I can drop down heading and choose to apply an H1 to that. Great. Now I want to insert an image. Do I want it? And then it's going to ask me, do I want to insert it before, after, wrap it, or nest it? I just want to put it after this. Which image do I want? Well, let's start with the Black-Eyed Susan PNG. Choose open. And you may get this message. It's saying that I haven't saved this file. And this is really important because let's say that you hand this off to someone else. It's going to be looking for this file on your computer with the file path you've given it. So I'll say okay to that. And you'll see what's happened. It says file, Macintosh, HD, users, admin, yada, yada, yada. And it doesn't really need all that. So let me undo that. Instead, first, I'll choose save. It's a good idea to save this. We'll just save it as index.html. Now, when we go to insert an image, it won't give us that message, and you'll see what will happen. Image after. I select my Black-Eyed Susan. It pops in there, and it's got a direct reference to a local folder, images, where the Black-Eyed Susan is. That way, when I hand this folder for this website off to someone else, I don't have this really long file name that's not even going to show up on someone else's computer. So be very careful about saving your work first. If you ever get that message, just undo and go back and save it. And be careful that you don't get these really long sources that point to someplace on your computer. So there we go. There's the Black-Eyed Susan. I'm going to insert another image this time. And this time, let's look at our headshot transparent. And as you can see, it's done a nice job of displaying how she's going to look with no background. Okay, because I saved it as a quick export as PNG, and it removed the background. So any background I have in here will appear there. All right, let's insert another image, but this time, let's insert the rollover image. I want to go after these guys. Now, it's really important when you do the insert rollover image to really pay attention to what you're doing in this dialog box the first time. So first of all, image name, I'm just going to call it headshot. The original image, I want the black and white first. And the rollover image, I want the color image. So it's going to preload. You can check or uncheck this. It's a good idea to preload the image because when someone hovers over it, it doesn't have to first download. But if you want to save space for download, you can choose not to preload the rollover image, and it just may take some time the first time they roll over it. It's a great time to put the alternate text in, and you can even put a URL in if you'd like. Now, when you say OK, a bunch of code is going to get added. Watch this. Look at all this. So if you're not familiar with JavaScript, well, that's what it's done. This script tag here, all the way down to the closing script tag, this is added JavaScript to create this action. And this JavaScript pretty much just says, hey, when someone rolls over this image, then swap it with the alternate image, okay? And so you can also see it's added some JavaScript in here in our body element. It's added the onload attribute, which references that JavaScript. So it can get very complicated, especially if you don't understand JavaScript, especially if you make a mistake or you add multiple images. It's really important to pay attention to file naming and doing that correctly. So let's go ahead and preview this whole page in a browser, save the changes. And as you can see, we've got this square image, we've got a transparent image, and a rollover image. Okay, so those are some ways that you can use Photoshop to work with images for the web, size them appropriately, and even make some rollovers. Now, let's use brackets this time. This is just a text editor. And I'm going to create a brand new HTML file, save it first, and navigate to where everything is. I'm going to call this CSS rollover.html. It's in the same location as where the other images are, so it should work. And I'm going to go out to the web to search for image rollover CSS. There it is. I've searched it before. And W3 Schools has tutorials on how to do fancy things like this. Okay, and there's multiple pages of things you can do. So it's really fun. Let's just go to the first one. And if I click try it yourself, it shows me the code. Okay, so let me just select all, copy it, come back over to brackets and paste it. I'm going to use this code as a starter. You'll notice what they've done is they put all the CSS right in here. It's embedded between the style tags. It could be external if I wanted it to, but I'll just keep it in there for this tutorial. And down here, this is where all the magic happens. So you've got a class that's called container with an image in it, and inside of that container is also another div called overlay. So should I hover over this, it's going to display this class hello world, as you can see from the example. Now, if I change this image to something that's on my computer, going to the images folder, I'll grab that black and white. I can save that and preview it. And as you can see, now I've got the picture of this young lady. But hello world pops up, and I'd rather swap it with the color image that I have of her. So that's going to take a couple of tricks. So first of all, I don't want this text to say hello world. I just need another image. So actually, I'm just going to copy all of this, paste it here, change this to black and white, change this to color. The alt attribute just lets people know what they're looking at if they can't see or if the image doesn't load. Okay, and then I want this to be the color image. So now I've got the black and white, but the headshot color. So let's see how this works. I'm going to save that. Look at the preview and look at that. It's a beautiful fade in of that image. Okay, now it's not exactly the same as just swapping it out because it's fading, and all that magic happens here with all these transform and transition properties that you see inside of the CSS. So sometimes it's a really great idea to just get a starting point, figure out what they're doing, and then just make it work for yourself. I hope this has been helpful for you to try to get into making images ready for the web using Photoshop and getting them on your web pages using either a text editor or Adobe Dreamweaver. Have a good day.